Trigger warning. This podcast is about grief. Whether you are newly bereaved or whether you have been stuck in grief for years, I do hope this podcast brings you some comfort. Grief is such a universal experience, but we all do it differently. This podcast is not about fixing you or forcing the healing process, because there is no cure for grief. It can only be absorbed, experienced, loved and cared for. So whether you are doing it privately behind closed doors, or like me, you are kicking and screaming your way through, let's support each other. This is a safe space where we can come together and share experiences. My hope is that this podcast shines a light on your path and gives you the strength to navigate your way through the grieving process. My name is Louise Bates, and I'm so pleased we connected. I'm looking forward to interviewing people who have also walked this path to find out what worked for them, in the hope that it helps you too. I'm sending you so much love and support, and I look forward to sharing this crazy journey with you. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Gift for Grief, and today I am delighted to have Becci Willets with me. Becci is a GP and she has a beautiful blog called Bereavement and Beyond. She set up this blog to not only remember her dad, who sadly died last July, but also to share practical advice about death, dying and funerals. Becci's experience of grief helps her to support people because she can speak about death, dying and bereavement, not only from a professional angle but also a personal one. So welcome, Becci, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So perhaps we could start with a little bit about you and why you decided to start writing your blog.
Okay, so I've been a GP for 12 years, doctor for 17 years, and my dad died last July. It was unexpected. We didn't have any time to come to terms with the fact that he was dying. We were sort of told that he was gravely ill on the Monday and he died on the Thursday. It was really hard to just get our heads around it in that short space of time. In some ways, I'm glad that we had in a little bit of time to get our heads around it, but it still didn't feel like it was enough. And when someone dies, all of a sudden you're at your worst and you're thrown into this sea of admin that has to be done, and all these things that people are telling you, this needs to be done and it needs to be done by this day and that day. And actually all you feel like doing is just sitting in a room and shutting the door and shutting everyone out. And I realised it was a bit of a minefield, and I thought that if someone died, I would know what to do, because I thought that as a doctor I would just know what to do and know where to go and where to find all the information that I needed. And I suddenly realised that actually I really didn't. So I wanted to set something up to help other people, basically, through those difficult, dark times early on.
Yeah, I don't think anything can prepare you for the death of a loved one. It doesn't matter how much time you have, does it? And then, like you say, there's all the legal processes that need to take place afterwards, and you're just not in the right headspace to do that.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's really. I've read your blogs, and you write so beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, I felt like I got to know your dad through your words, and he sounds like he was amazing. So he had heart surgery in January and he went back to work at the age of 75. I mean, that's incredible.
He did. I mean, he was incredibly stoical. He was diagnosed with heart failure, I think, in 2006, 2007. And at that time, it was quite scary, because as a first-year junior doctor, I opened all the textbooks, and the textbook said that heart failure has a worse prognosis than the worst cancers, was the exact phrase I think that it said. Less than a 50% 5-year survival. So, I was expecting to be bereaved very quickly.
Yeah.
But the treatments had come on so much that actually my dad carried on work. His consultant told him to stop working But he didn't. He said, I'm not stopping working. I can't afford to pack in work, and I'm not going to anyway, because I actually like my job. So he carried on working and lived a really full and active life until all of a sudden one of his valves started to play up and he needed this surgery.
Yeah. So do you find writing very cathartic?
I do. People who know me will tell you that I don't shut up, that I talk all the time, non-stop. And about most things, I can talk quite easily. I'm probably what people term an oversharer. But I think in terms of the grief and the loss of my dad, I found it really hard to share. Because I'm an only child, so I'd got my mum on one side with her grief. My husband and my dad were so close. They were like best friends, as well as father and son-in-law. My husband had lost his dad a year previous. So the immense grief that he was going through, I sort of felt a little bit caught in the middle of it all and was sort of like, well, I don't want to talk about my grief to them because they're grieving. So I just found it really awkward. But the best way I found was to get it written down.
Yes.
And organise it into some sort of form and make something of it.
Yes, yeah. And I can resonate with that because I found journaling really helpful.
Yeah.
Because it gets it out of your head, doesn't it, onto paper?
Yeah.
And it helps you to process it. So as a GP, you're dealing with patients who have maybe had a terminal diagnosis or people who are grieving. Do you feel your experience of grief has helped you to become a better doctor?
100% yes. In the last few months, it's really strange, actually, the way that things happen. It's very rare that I've seen that many people in my practice who've lost a partner. Because these people just haven't come my way. I think often they'll go to the older doctors, maybe in the practice, the more experienced doctors. But since Dad died, I've noticed that I've had quite a number of people who've either lost a parent or lost a spouse come my way. Now, I don't know whether they've been directed my way, because this does happen in general practice. You kind of get the type of patients that sometimes reception think you're, in inverted commas, good at.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just happens, it just happens. It's just sort of one of those things.
Yeah.
But I know I've, seen quite a few people who have lost a spouse in the last few months, and I felt that I could really help them because I've drawn on my mum's experiences of loss of a life partner of 50 plus years, and been able to really help people and to normalise things for them, because I think that's probably the biggest question you get asked as a doctor. Is this normal? Should I feel like this?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I should feel. Is this weird? Is it wrong? And I think people just, I don't know, people are just worried about what other people think of them.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. So as a GP, what can you offer people who are really struggling in their grief?
So I think one of the most important things that we offer people is time to just talk and not be judged. And also that ability to say to them, this is normal, this is okay, this is, the emotions that you've got are not abnormal, that the process you're going through is a process, it has to, it's something you have to go through. You can't rush it, you just have to get on with it. And obviously we have other agencies we can signpost people to, which is great. We've got bereavement support groups, we've got people like Cruise Bereavement, we've got in-house bereavement counsellors that we've got access to, but actually particularly first as a first point of contact, people don't want that at that point. They just want someone to tell them that actually it's okay and you can grieve, and to almost give permission. And the other thing that commonly people want is time off work.
Of course, yes.
And a sick note for a period of time. And again, that in itself, for some people, is just a relief to be able to have someone say, actually, if you don't feel like you can go to work, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. But equally, if you don't want a sick note and you want to carry on working, that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, you know, telling people that it's different for everyone, and, you know, you've got to do the right thing for you at that moment.
Yeah. It's funny because when my son Matthew died, I never thought about going to the doctors because I just thought, oh, they'll just give me some medication. I just see doctors as giving out prescriptions. Yeah. But do GPs receive any training in the field of grief and loss, or do you just all have to wing it?
We do. I mean, mainly during our mod. I mean, for me, it was during our module on cancer and palliative care. So it was very much centred around end of life care and dealing with people who have had an expected death in the family, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual, actual practical information to give people, I don't think I can recall having any real training on any of it. It's just stuff that you pick up as you go along, and you get things like Breaking Bad news training, and then so you kind of have to draw on that to do the bereavement side of things. But I think there's not very much in terms of formal training.
Yeah, it must be really difficult. So for some people, they are offered medication to help them with their grief. How does the medication help them?
It's a good question. I think often medication is there are different types of medication. It sort of depends on what people are given. Sometimes what people need is just some medication short term to just get them over that initial, severe shock and upset, and just to sort of settle them down enough to be able to sort of still function at some sort of level to do the things that they need to do. But I have to say, in my experience, giving medication directly after a bereavement is quite rare.
Oh, okay.
Because I think my sort of feeling about it personally is that, it's important to grieve, and it's important to feel the feelings, and it's important to go through that process. And I usually will have that discussion with people. And actually, if I talk to people, quite often they don't, once we've had a chat about it, they don't want medication.
Yeah.
Because actually they don't want to feel numb. They want to feel something. They want to feel the grief and experience it and go through it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes medication comes a little bit further down the line if people are developing depression or anxiety after a bereavement. But usually that's, in the weeks and months to come. Yeah,
it is important that people feel their emotions, isn't it? I mean, feeling is healing, and medication maybe could prevent this from happening if they're feeling disconnected from their feelings. So medication isn't the cure for grief, but it can play a part when used correctly. Yeah. So I'm not against medication, and I agree when it's used as a stepping stone, it can be a good thing. But over the years, I've had clients that have been on medication for years, and what they really need is support, maybe counselling or some kind of talk therapy. But this waiting list for counselling is just ridiculous now, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's, we know that the best treatment for a lot of mental health conditions, and bereavement is talking therapy.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to get. It's so hard to get. There are national shortages of the right people to do the therapies. So even, places are trying to get these people in to work there, but they just can't get hold of them. There just aren't enough to go around, like same with doctors, nurses, all the professions really. So, a lot of what's being offered can be like online support, and that's right for some people, and that works for some people. But it's horses for courses. Some people need that one-to-one.
Absolutely. So you say that the writing helped you, but what other things helped you navigate your grief journey, Becci?
For me, it was really important that we talked about my dad and we mentioned his name. And, you know, I was very kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, just very definite from the off that I wanted to talk about my dad. I didn't want people to feel that if they came into a room, they got to stop talking. They couldn't mention his name. You know, we couldn't laugh about things. Because one of the greatest gifts that we had as a family was humour. We, you know, me and my husband and my mum and dad would go out together lots and go on holiday together, and we laughed from the minute we got in the car to the minute we got home. We laughed.
Yeah.
So for us, it was, you know, being able to still laugh about things and not feeling that because we were grieving, we'd got to sit in a corner, dress in black and be miserable. Because yes, we were sad, we were desperately sad, but you know, we didn't want to forget all those wonderful memories that we got and those wonderful things that we'd all done together.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. That's a good note that you've made there, because people feel guilty if they laugh. I remember the first time I laughed after Matthew died, and I was in my lounge, and I've got 5 sisters, and we had a girls' night, we had a pizza night and film night, and we were laughing about something, and I thought, God, I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. My son died just recently. So, but that's normal to feel that as well,
But we did feel that, you know, like Dad died on the Thursday evening, and obviously Mom spent a lot of time at my house over the coming weeks, and still does, you know, because we're very close. We live a few doors away from each other. So the 3 of us, you know, were watching stuff on the telly, and we were laughing, and we, you know, we had a bottle of wine, as you do, and laughed about things and memories, and we talked loads and loads about memories and things that we'd done and places we'd been. And then the next day we all got up and sort of said, oh, was that right? Should, you know, now I feel a bit guilty that we laughed and we reminisced, and we all sort of talked about it, and we were like, well, no, because that was how we felt at the time, and we wanted to share those memories, and that was an important thing. And you know, actually my dad wouldn't have wanted us to be sitting miserable with the TV off and you know, not talking.
No,
that's absolutely the last thing he would have wanted, because he was a very kind of, you know, keep calm and carry on sort of character. So the last thing he would have wanted was for us to be sitting maudlin and miserable.
Absolutely.
Really.
And I think that's really important that our listeners can hear this and think, oh, that's okay. It's okay to laugh. Give yourself permission to, you know, laugh and have jokes, and it's all part of the healing process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And if you feel guilty, guilt doesn't fix anything, does it? Just let it go. Just let it go. So, did you find people were unsure how to be around you when Dad died?
Yeah, absolutely. People don't know what to say.
No.
And they usually say something and go, oh, well, I suppose that doesn't really help, does it? Or, you know, they go, oh, I'm really sorry. How are you doing? Oh, that's a really stupid question. I'm like, actually, it's not a stupid question, because, you know, it's nice that you've asked me. It's nice that you've thought about me. Yes, you already know the answer, but you've engaged with me, and that's what's really important. I think, you know, the worst thing is that sometimes people cross the street and don't come and talk to you because they don't know what to say. I'd much rather somebody got it, you know, a bit wrong or didn't know what to say and just stood and looked at me than cross the street and ignore me.
Yeah, that's the worst thing, isn't it, when people don't acknowledge it. Yeah, totally. So how would you describe grief to someone who's never had a significant loss?
Oh, wow. That is a question. I think it just comes into everything that you do from the moment that person dies.
Yeah.
You know, it's just in you and around you, and it changes everything.
Yeah.
Life's never quite the same again, but that doesn't mean that life doesn't go on, and it doesn't mean that, you know, you can't go on. It just means that life's always going to be different. And I think it changes the way that you look at a lot of things. You know, I mean, one of the hardest things for me with the grief around my dad was music. Because again, music's a real passion of mine and was a real passion of my family. When I was growing up, the radio was on all the time, you know, it was just always in the background. And so for me, one of the things I've always gone to when I've been sad about something or upset is music. But it was so hard to do that because literally every song that came on the radio had a memory attached to it. So for me, for a while, it really did sort of spoil music a little bit for me. You know, and it made that really difficult. But that's got better with time.
Good.
But I think it is the fact that the grief's always there. It's always there in the background, and it kind of creeps up on you when you least expect it. You know, a few days after Dad had died, I went to collect a prescription from my mum, and I was sat at the traffic lights, and a song came on the radio, and I just burst into tears. Floods of tears at the traffic lights of all places, you know, and you can't control it. You can try, but you really can't.
Sometimes it just hits you. It doesn't matter where you are, and it can be a song, it can be a smell, it can be seeing someone that looks like your loved one. It can be anything, and they're the worst ones, I think, because you don't see them coming, do you?
Absolutely. Yesterday, a man walked into church, and he was very smartly dressed with a shirt and tie, just like my dad always was. And it sort of caught me unawares. Really, really strange, but it did.
Oh, well, do you feel that grief has changed you in any way?
I think it has. I think it's made me more thankful for things. I think it's made me more thankful for life. And it's made me just reflect more about things, I think. You know, and I think people often say when a loved one's died that it's made them sort of take stock a little bit and think about what they're doing with their life. And, you know, I'm not going to say I've had some huge epiphany or anything that dramatic, but I think it has made me think that, you know, life is too short to get hung up on little stupid things. You know, we need to just enjoy things, you know, do the things that you want to say, you know, go the places that you want to do, you know, and not sort of keep putting things off, really.
Because none of us know what's around the corner, do we?
No, absolutely not.
So what words would you choose to use to express your condolences to someone?
Oh, I suppose it depends, I guess, on how well I know the person. But, you know, usually I'm my usual go-to is I'm really sorry for your loss. Because I think that is quite inoffensive. It can't usually be taken more than one way, and people seem to be okay with it. It's
sort of the universal thing, isn't it? It's funny because I always use that as well. Well, always generally use it. But I did have one lady say to me, "Oh, I hate that. My daughter's not lost, she's dead." So you think you're saying the right thing sometimes, but then sometimes it doesn't land right. But I always say, just look for the good intention behind the words.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? It isn't about the words; it's about the intent and the fact that someone's just, you know, remembered to ask you, and has sort of tried to care.
Absolutely.
But I know what you mean about the word loss. In the context of I'm sorry for your loss, that doesn't bother me too much. But it's I hate euphemisms for death in general. As a doctor, I'm quite sort of I think we're quite black and white a lot of the time about these things. So for me, one of the things that I sort of did from the very offset that Dad died was use the word death.
Yes.
Now, it drove my mum potty because she didn't like the word because it was very final and it was very kind of, black and white.
Yeah.
And I guess we're different generations. But for me, it was really important that, people do die. It's normal. I hate to say, but it is. It is a part of life. It is a normal thing that happens. The circumstances aren't always normal. The circumstances are often not pleasant, but it does happen to all of us at some point. So I think for me, it was really important to use that word and to encourage other people to use it and to sort of have that acceptance that as much as none of us wants to accept it, death happens.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like the term passed away.
No.
And I'm sure I've used it over
like
the years, but since Matthew died, I'm really aware of the language that around death and dying and bereavement now. And I remember when my dad died, my mum saying, because she wanted to put a piece in the newspaper, and she made a point saying that Bob Rogerson died, because the lady wanted to put passed away. She went, no, he died. I remember thinking, that was a bit harsh, Mum. But I totally get that now. Totally get that.
The newspaper announcement was the one place I didn't get my way. We did use a euphemism of some sort. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, can we not just put died? And my mum said, no, she said, no, not because of us, but because other people might not like it.
Isn't it funny how people are over the words?
Yeah, and it's strange, isn't it? But language is really important.
Yeah, it is. I think for some people saying passed away, perhaps it softens it a bit. But for me, I like to use the word death, died. Yeah. So I'm on the same page with you there.
Well, there's no confusion then, is that?
No.
And I think especially like when you're talking to kids. And people, people who might sort of, have, autism or sort of learning disability.
Yes.
I think, language can be very important and people need to know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And euphemisms just really confuse people.
Absolutely, yeah. So can you recommend any books or films or podcasts or groups to support people who are grieving?
Good question. I often signpost my patients to our local hospice because our local hospice, Mary Stevens, runs a lot of bereavement services and is the main kind of hub for bereavement services in Dudley where I work.
Yes.
Cruise bereavement is another one that's obviously we often suggest to people. The problem with cruises, they are very busy and very oversubscribed often. And we've got, and it can be hard really to keep up with resources because things change, groups move, they meet on a Tuesday, but then they suddenly start meeting on a Wednesday and in a different place. So actually, I often refer our patients to our social prescribers, who we've got attached to the practice, and their job really is to help people navigate all of the support out there that's not medical.
Okay.
So they will know where groups meet. They will know, where there might be an appropriate group for that person. They can do an individual assessment to know where that person might fit in really well. Yeah. They can even accompany them sometimes to the group the first time and make sure that they're okay and that they get there okay and sort of fit in there okay.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And those are the sort of main places that I usually do. And a really good one that I heard of recently, which I actually hadn't heard of, but it was suggested to one of my patients by a psychiatrist, and it was in the letter, was Blue Cross run pet bereavement.
Oh.
And one of my patients had a pet that had died, and the psychiatrist had set that up, and I had suggested that, and I'd never heard of that before.
No, I've not heard of that.
So I've kind of kept that one in my memory bank, because sometimes we do see people who are struggling with pet bereavement as well.
Absolutely. It's something we've not really talked about much on the podcast. I'd like to do an episode on that because it is massive, because pets are part of our family too, aren't they?
They are.
So, yeah, I'll put all these links and information into the show notes so the listeners can check them there. So for people who have lost a loved one, or perhaps for others who have just been stuck in grief for years, what words of wisdom can you share to maybe help them loosen their grief in some way?
I think you've got to find what works for you, and I think, for some people it is, going and locking themselves away from the world and working through things, in their own way. And for some people, that's the right thing. I think for a lot of people, that's the temptation and it's not the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think some people who do that sometimes realise that it was not good for them, and that actually getting out, seeing people, sharing and talking is a good thing. I think things like, remembering the good times with that person and sort of, reminiscing about those good times, I think can really help you through that grief, because just because that person's gone, they don't cease to exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're always going to have those memories. You've always got those good times. And if I'm feeling a bit vulnerable and a bit sad, for me, I will, take myself off on my own, put some music on, music that reminds me of my dad, and just sit and listen or look at photos and that kind of thing, and that, for me, that really helps. Now, some people will say, oh, that's horrible, that will just make me sad. That will make my grief worse. So I think it's just so individual, and it's, as time goes on, you work out and you realise what works for you and what's counterproductive, I think, is the other thing to learn, what really doesn't work for you and what, makes you kind of maudlin and really sad, and, what can drive you into that spiral of depression.
Yeah, yeah. So where are you in your grief journey now?
It's interesting because I think we're in the sort of second year of grief, I suppose. Everyone talks about the first year being the hardest, and I didn't necessarily find that the first year was necessarily harder than this year, because I think in the first year, it's quite fresh in people's minds. So when you catch up with people, or when you see people, they'll say, oh, how are you? Oh, really sorry to hear about your dad, da, da, da. And they'll acknowledge things. Yeah. I think after that first year, things kind of shift a little bit, and people haven't forgotten, but they kind of don't mention it anymore so much. So it's that awkward thing of people don't know whether they should mention it, or, is the person over it now and they don't, if I mention it, it's going to break it all up and upset them. Like, people really don't know what to do. And I think people said to me the anniversaries will be really hard, and I really didn't find that. Yeah. And part of me felt really bad that I didn't find that initially. But then I sat down and I thought about it. I mean, I booked the date my dad died off work, because I thought, I don't know realistically how I'm going to be. Yeah. And actually, if I'm not in a good place, I can't help patients. And the last thing I want to do is wake up on that morning and be paralysed with grief and feel like I can't go in and have to ring in sick. Yeah. So I planned for it. And I woke up on that day and I thought, I don't feel any different. Why don't I feel any different? Yeah. And I didn't do anything really that day. I just sat at home and I reflected. And I thought, well, it's just a date, isn't it, in the diary?
Absolutely.
It's no different. I just thought, I don't miss my dad any more or any less today than I did yesterday.
No.
It's a date.
Yeah.
So I think for me, in terms of where I am in my grief, I think I'm at the stage where I'm sort of accepted things. Things are what they are. I can't change them. And I'm at the stage now where I want to sort of start to try and move forward. Yeah. Not move on, because I think that's, again, it's language, isn't it? But I think move on suggests that you've left that person behind. Yeah. But move forward and look at what the next chapter of our life is going to be.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I think that you've explained that beautifully. Do you believe that grief has given you any gifts?
So I think the biggest gift it's probably given me is an understanding of what grief is.
Yes, yeah.
Because we've all read the books about the cycle of grief and about the different stages you go through. And that, yeah, you do go through those stages, but it's not a linear process. There's a lot of back and forth,
Yes.
you know, and it's not one size fits all. And obviously I knew that before, and I've said that to people. I've said that to lots of patients, you know, you've got to go through it at your own pace. It is what it is. You know, your grief, blah, blah, blah. But I almost felt like I was sort of telling people from a textbook.
Yes, yeah.
And I think lived experience gives you a totally different perspective, and it feels more authentic now when I'm saying it.
Yeah.
It's awful that I had to go through a horrible situation to get to that. But I think, you know, you have to use any situation that comes at you in life and try and turn it round and make something good out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you can probably connect to your patients as well on a deeper level, having gone through that experience as well. So do you have any special ways to remember your dad, or any family rituals?
Well, I mean, Christmas has always been massive in our house.
Yeah.
And last year we were a bit torn about Christmas, because my dad loved Christmas. He made it amazing for me every year, you know, and I've got some fantastic memories. So when it came to sort of, you know, the autumn last year, I was a little bit like, okay, Christmas is coming, and what's going to be expected of us?
Yeah.
You know, because there is that expectation of people of how you're going to be and what you're going to do. And, you know, I said to my mum, I'm really quite keen that we don't do anything different this year than we've done every year.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's a good, you know, we've got some really good memories, and my dad would hate it if we got, you know, sacked off Christmas.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He really would.
Yeah.
I know he'd be like really mad with us. You know, even the January before we went in for his surgery, my mum threatened him, don't put the Christmas lights up when I'm not here. You know, and in fact, don't put them up at all, because, you know, I don't want you on a ladder. I don't want you doing this, that, and the other. And he still put them up when she was at work as a surprise. Yeah. So, you know, for us, Christmas is really important, and we've tried to do the things that we've always done. And Dad sort of instigated this thing where we all bought each other a silly present, something ridiculous. We wrapped it up. We were allowed to see it on Christmas Eve, feel it, squeeze it, look at it, try and work out what it was. And you know, and obviously, you know, we choose whose was the best. And we've still carried on doing that. Oh. And friends who spend Christmas with us have been sort of co-opted into that as well. Yeah. And that's, you know, that's a nice memory.
Yeah. Christmas is a big one for most people, isn't it?
It is.
It's the big milestone.
It is.
And I think it's lovely that you're carrying on the traditions. And we do Christmas different now. We just go on holiday over Christmas. So we celebrate Christmas in a nice hot sunny country with our Christmas hats and a drink on the beach, and we just do it differently, and everybody's got to do what's right for them.
Absolutely. And I would say to people, if you don't feel like doing Christmas, don't do it. You know, if that's your way of dealing with it, is we're going to put it in a box and we're not going to do it, or we're going to do it completely differently, that's fine. Again, it's what works for you and your family and your loved ones. And you know, again, we were torn about, do we send Christmas cards? Are people going to feel weird if we send them a Christmas card? But we decided we were going to do that because, again, there were people in other parts of the country who didn't know, and we wanted to get the message to them. Yeah. But I think that some people probably didn't send us Christmas cards because they were worried that it was we were going to be offended.
Yeah.
Again, it's just so hard, because I think a lot of people think there's a protocol for these sorts of things, and there really isn't.
I mean, everybody is like winging it, aren't they? And one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was to help people to become more grief literate, get used to talking about grief, and not to have so much sort of awkwardness around the subject. So what would you like people to learn from your experience?
I think I would like people to talk about death. That's the biggest thing for me, is actually using the word, mentioning the word, and talking about what you would want, at such times as you die. Because for me, one of the hardest things was that we didn't really know what my dad wanted. We didn't really know anything, because he just wouldn't talk about it. He was very typical black country bloke. You don't talk about your feelings. You don't talk about grief. You don't talk about death. Whereas me and my mum are very much different to that. She's a receptionist in the practice where I work. So, we've been around death a lot.
Yes.
We've seen people who've had good experiences. We've seen people who've had bad experiences. We've seen all sorts of things in our time in the NHS. So I think we realise how important it is to have your house in order and to sort of know what you want. So, we've always talked about it very openly. Me and my mum have always had very honest dialogue about it all. She knows what I'd want. I know what she'd want. Whether she'll get a horse and carriage with yellow plumes and Copacabana on the way out, I don't know. But that's what she wants anyway. But my dad would never engage. He'd be like, oh, don't be so morbid.
Yeah.
We don't need to think about that yet.
Well, we were exactly the same. And through this podcast, we've had a couple of guests that do end-of-life planning. And from this, we're now actually making our death book so that, all our passwords will be in there. I mean, it's a slow process. We haven't finished it yet. All the information that our daughter or whoever's going to sort out our affairs afterwards, or whether Bill goes first or whether I go first, it's going to make it easier for us because when you lose somebody so close to you, the last thing you need to do is not be able to find information, not know what they want. And, it just makes it easier, doesn't it, for the people left behind?
And I think now it would be even harder for people because I think, my dad's generation had got everything on paper. It was, my dad was very organised. It was all in, we knew where everything was actually. His filing system wasn't the best. It wasn't in the right order, but we knew where it was, and we could find it. But I think with the digital age, I think it's going to be really hard because, everyone's got passwords for everything and a lot of stuff is stored online. People don't have paper records for stuff. It's just, in their email somewhere. And I think it will make things very difficult if people don't plan for it and have things like a book with stuff in. And I've got a death book, which I'm again, I haven't started filling it in yet, but it's there and I've got plans to do it. Again, my husband looks at me a bit like I'm a bit batty because, again, he's quite stoical, quite blokey. But we need to say that?
We need to have these conversations, don't we?
Absolutely.
We need to get it out there.
Absolutely.
So, So, what are your thoughts about the afterlife, Becky?
That's probably that's quite an easy question for me. I'm a Christian, so for me, I believe that we're going to heaven and there's something for us afterwards. And I think that's one of the things that actually has really helped me. And really sort of, it's really helped me through my grief and through the difficult times. To have that belief and that faith, and that sort of knowledge.
Oh, that's good to hear. So do you believe our loved ones can give us signs?
Yes, I do. And we've experienced it as a family, whether people believe it or not. We have experienced things. It was very, very strange experience. I haven't experienced anything, strangely. But I think sometimes people get the signs who need the signs.
Yeah.
So, one day my husband was in the house. My mum was a few doors down in her house. And they both told me, and it happened at more or less the same sort of time. My husband smelled a strong smell of terps in the bathroom upstairs.
Yeah.
And my dad was a decorator. And one of my childhood smell kind of memories is terps.
Yes.
Because he'd always be getting paint on something and trying to get it off with terps.
Right.
So Mark smelt that. And then on the same day, my mum smelt my dad's aftershave, and she hadn't been by anything of his. She hadn't picked his aftershave up or sprayed it or anything, and she smelt it in the house. Oh. And it was really strange because they both told me the story, and then we were all in the same room after. I went, right, you two need to tell each other your stories. Yeah. And they were like, oh, that's weird.
Oh, I love it.
But,
I love it.
And my husband has had quite a lot of dreams where particularly his dad's been there and my dad have been there. And the one dream that he had, his dad said, I'm sorry, lad, we've got to go now. We've got to go. And he took my dad with him. So again, I think it... Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. So they can visit us in our dreams, send us little signs. Yeah. Just to prove that this is, death is not the end. There is something afterwards.
And actually, I've got a musical one that I'd forgotten about, but this one is even probably weirder in a way.
I like weird.
And it's musical, which was great.
Yeah.
We, at Dad's funeral, we had a collection, and we collected Fraction Heart at Russell's Hall Hospital, who's like the cardiac rehab service, where Dad would have been expecting to go in after his surgery, had things not taken a turn. So Mum and I felt strongly that we wanted to go and give the cheque to them personally. Yeah. So we did. We made an appointment, went. And we walked in, and where it is, there's a gym, and they got some music on in the background. And the woman sent us away to take a seat. And we sat down, and on the sound system, the Travelling Wilburys came on. The End of the Line. Oh. And that song is really important. Like my dad was really into the Travelling Wilburys, and he used to play the tape over and over in the car. It used to drive me crackers as a kid. But then I really liked them as I got older because, when you're a kid, you can't like what your dad likes, can you? Because it's not cool. And the line that's repeated over and over in this song is, "It's all right." Yeah. And Mum and I just looked at each other and we were just like, yeah, it really is playing. This is really strange. Yeah. And it's one of those songs, you don't hear it very often. It's not like, it's not like it's the Beatles or something, something really common that you hear all the time. I don't think I've ever heard that song played in a public place quite like that. It was really strange.
So the timing was incredible.
Yeah, impeccable.
Absolutely. I don't believe in coincidences. These synchronicities are signs, definitely. Dad was there, so he's aware.
And he was telling us it's all right. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's lovely. Well, my last question, Becci, is if you could give your dad a message, what would you say?
I would just tell him that we're okay, we miss him, and that I'll see him again.
Beautiful. And on that note, we shall finish. Thank you so much, Becci. I highly recommend my listeners check out your blog, Bereavement and Beyond, and I'll put all the links in the show notes, including Cruise Bereavement, Blue Cross Pets Bereavement, and of course the song It's All Right by the Travelling Wilburys. Thank you so much, Becci. You've been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Gift for Grief. Please feel free to share it with your friends and family, and let's encourage others to become more grief literate. If you're struggling with your grief or worried about your mental health, please do speak to your doctor. If you would like to join me on my social media groups, check out the show notes for all the links, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. The music on this podcast was written and recorded by Matthew Bates and can be found on his 2 albums, Fight Back and Kaleidoscope.